Now first we want to check for is any leaks in your engine itself. Normally it does help to have a clean engine. To inspect here first. Now what we have here, starting from the top, now this is just a straight 4-cylinder. There's no V configuration on it. Any of the V configurations, they'll be a little different designed. What you have here is actually a valve cover itself right on the top here. And normally you want to check for just a little seepage around the gasket itself just to see if it's leaking any oil or anything like that. A lot of the vehicles with hemispherical designed heads will normally have the spark plugs through the center of the valve cover itself, and what's a common problem with them is they actually leak in the inside oil. Next what we want to check is also your head gasket. Now head gaskets can be a little trickier to check. This one here will have straight from the valve cover, goes down next to your head, and then that bolts to your block. So what you'll want to do is look, a little hard to see in there, but you can see the difference in color there, so there's a gasket right in between there. With head gaskets, there's a few different ways they can start to leak. They can leak to the exterior of the engine or the interior of the engine. Now the interior of the engine, it can leak either into the heads itself or where the oil is pumped up to your head. So what happens is the coolant actually does get into your oil. Now for inspecting that, what you want to do is you want to pull your engine oil dipstick out. And normally your oil is kind of a golden black color. What you'll have then, if you do have coolant leaking into your oil, is be somewhat of a milky color. So that's also something to keep in mind. Now if it is leaking into your head itself, sometimes you can check the reservoir tank for bubbling. Now in a lot of these newer cars, they're actually a pressurized tank, so it's a little harder to check. Now it depends on your vehicle. It's always good to do research on this, just to be ahead of when you go look at the car. Or what you can do is, while the vehicle is running, you want to make sure it's optimum operating temperature, so it's usually about halfway on the gauge itself. You usually want to let the car warm up, and you want to see if there's actually steam coming out the exhaust. Now this can be hard to check, especially in cold weather, because the difference in temperature between the exterior weather and the heat coming from the engine itself. Now for inspecting any of the other hoses around the engine bay itself, you just want to look around any of the coolant lines that go around, or fuel lines, and the power steering lines, just any of the rubber hoses. Now this does depend on vehicles. Some of them do have rubber, others have steel lines. There is normally transitions in between these. Just like here, as you can see, it goes from a rubber hose to a plastic fitting, and then to a rubber hose again, and back down to another rubber hose. So you always want to make note to make sure if you see any liquid just forming around those joints there. Sometimes it may be simple as a clamp that just needs to be replaced. Other times the hose might be slowly deteriorating, so it might need to be replaced in the future. Now if we're looking under the engine itself to see if it is leaking on the pan, what you want to do is climb under the vehicle. Now most new vehicles do have a belly pan underneath, so it's actually incredibly hard to see if there's any leaks itself. So sometimes what you want to do is look on the seams of this pan to see if there's any residue on there. Now that could be just from somebody, even when they're topping up a fluid, just spilling it below. So it doesn't necessarily mean the vehicle does have a leak itself. Other times we want to look for if the pan is hanging down. You can see around the outside of the pan to see if there's any residue around there, possibly maybe drips, just to see if there's any fluid leaking from that. Next, what I'll be moving on to is the transmission itself. Now there's two types of configurations for the transmission and engine. There's a transverse and also an inline. The transverse is normally found on front-wheel drive vehicles. So this is the basic configuration here. You have your transmission, your engine. So this is a 4-cylinder, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4 cylinders all in line. And then you'll have your timing belt here and your accessories belt on the outside itself. Now for the other configuration, what you have is the engine and transmission will actually be rotated 90 degrees, which would be the easiest way to explain it in this scenario here. Your belts will be up front here, then your timing belt and your 1, 2, 3, 4 cylinders all the way back, and then your engine stops and continues on to your transmission itself, which is normally underneath the firewall here, basically your dash, and in some cases can run up between your seats where the center console is located. And basically what you'll have then is a drive shaft that continues all the way to a differential itself. In this setup here, what you'll have is drive shafts that continue on each side of the transmission. There's actually no differential per se, but a transaxle which distributes the power to the wheels itself. Now, there isn't a whole lot you can really check with transmissions itself. Automatics, you want to make sure they're up to operating temperature. Shift them through all the gears, take it for a good highway drive to ensure everything is okay, everything does shift properly. The vehicle does go into overdrive if it's equipped with overdrive. Now that depends on your year. A lot of the older vehicles don't have that, so it's something to keep in mind. Then with a manual transmission, you want to make sure all your gears work depending on how many speed your transmission is. So you'll have to also take it up to highway speeds, make sure all your synchros are good, no gears are grinding, anything like that. Also your clutch is good. And you also want to check for any fluid leaks. So you do have seals on the outside where the axles do come out. They're basically just your output seals, and you do have a seal in between your transmission and engine itself, so you want to make sure none of those seals are leaking. It's just basically a quick inspection underneath the vehicle. You want to look just for any residue. Possibly maybe someone has replaced it before, so you also want to make note if there's any maintenance receipts that goes along with the vehicle you're looking at purchasing. And also for the there's going to be a pan on the bottom of the transmission, which sometimes does go. Other times they do last for the lifetime of the vehicle, and they can leak oil, so you also want to keep that in mind. Automatic transmissions do also have filters, so you want to see if there's any receipts for those if it's ever been done. Now, the intervals at which it has to be done, it does depend on the vehicle. You also want to make sure the vehicle's up to operating temperature while it's running. You also want to check the transmission fluid itself, make sure it is fully topped up. If the vehicle has been run low on transmission fluid, there can be some issues there. Possibly maybe the transmission could be overheating when it's running, or it could be putting a little harder wear on the internal parts. So just something to be cautious about, because you might have something to fix down the road, and can be very costly. Now with manual transmissions, you normally can't check the oil in them, so it's a little harder. Possibly if you can take it to your local mechanic and have them check it out, it's always good, just as a pre-inspection itself. Now once you look at the vehicle after you've checked over some of the rough stuff, you want to start the vehicle up, and you want to make sure the vehicle does come up to full operating temperature to ensure that the engine is running properly and the transmission is functioning properly. Normally, with my personal experience, I don't normally like it when people actually pre-start the vehicle for me before I actually come to look at it. So if I actually do hop in the car to start it up myself, if I see the temperature gauge is up halfway of what the vehicle should be at, there might be something to be cautious about. Now, I'm not normally saying that that could be an issue, but it's something that you want to look out for just in case. Now, the engine does run on different cycles, so when it starts up, it might have a rough idle. Something could be amiss in the motor itself. After it's warmed up, it's maybe something that clears out, and that it can also happen oppositely too. Maybe when the vehicle starts up at cold start, it runs fine. After it warms up, it does have a hesitation or an idling issue, something like that. So it's always something to keep in mind. Now once you've had the vehicle running for a few minutes, what you also want to check for is you want to move it back a few feet, and then you want to look for where the vehicle was parked underneath to see if there's actually any droplets of fluid on the ground itself. That might also point out if the vehicle does have any leaks with the coolant system, oil, anything like that. Now normally this does vary between coolant. Coolant can be pink, can be kind of a greenish, yellowish color, depends on the manufacturer. The easiest way to check is just take a peek in your reservoir tank here. Now this is a Volkswagen, it does actually use a pink fluid. So you want to look for pink fluid on the ground. Same goes with transmission fluid. Transmission fluid is normally a pinkish color also. So you want to look for any pink marks. Motor oil, it's kind of hard to explain with that, because normally when the oil is fresh, it does have somewhat of a golden color. When it's more used, it turns more of a black color. So you want to look for anything like that on the ground. And same with power steering fluid. Now power steering fluid does also depend on the manufacturer itself. Sometimes it can be pink, other times it can be golden color, maybe almost black color. Now this does depend. It's best to consult with the vehicle you're looking at what the manufacturer's requirements are. Now once you gave everything a thorough inspection, this is something that helps you with your decision on purchasing a vehicle. Now if you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to post them. Thank you for watching my video.